From national security to global corruption, this is the Muckrakers on today's News Talk, TNT.
Well, hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Muckrakers with me, Andrew Eborn. And here on the Muckrakers, we pledge to continue tackling the most pressing and controversial issues of our day, shining more light and less heat on the matters that really concern you. What I'm looking at today is going over to the US and what on earth is happening with the US presidential campaign. And it's more of a conversation than an interrogation of. I'm joined by my wonderful TNT co-hosts, James Friedman, looking wonderfully tanned, and Taylor Hudak. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Hello, Andrew.
Good to see you. Now, 2 days after surviving that appalling assassination attempt, an emotional Donald Trump appeared at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee with a bandage on his ear, and he was greeted by a crowd shouting "fight," the word he mouthed upon surviving the shooting. Earlier, Trump nominated his vice presidential pick, which was Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, which sounds like a cheap sportswear store, doesn't it? But he was formally nominated as the GOP ticket for the presidential 2024 ticket. Now, we've looked at sort of J.D. Vance, and he's made all sorts of interesting comments about Trump beforehand. I think he said previously he wasn't a Trump fan. He himself is a venture capitalist turned Ohio senator. He rose to fame with his 2016 memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, I think it was, and he once described himself as a never-Trumper, calling the then candidate Donald Trump in 2016 an idiot, cultural heroine, and potential American Hitler. Horrendous language. What do you make of all of this, Taylor?
Yes, so we have so much news to cover now on the Republican side. And let me just say before I begin answering your question here, you know that Joe Biden has to be giving a huge sigh of relief that at least for this next week or two, perhaps the media is not so much focused on him and his mental capacities. But before I get into some of the policies or ideology of J.D. Vance, that is Trump's VP pick, I do want to talk about just briefly his history, his background. As you mentioned, Andrew, he does have quite an extraordinary life story that many would refer to as perhaps inspirational. So first of all, he's a very young man. He's only 39 years old. He will turn 40 in August. If Trump is elected in November, that would make J.D. Vance the third youngest vice president in United States history. And this is really interesting because it does really provide a contrast against Joe Biden, who is much older, 80 years old, who is also in a mental decline, and that has been much of the focus of the media the past few weeks. So you see a huge contrast here. Perhaps that also was a factor in former President Trump's decision to choose J.D. Vance, but he has a interesting background. After graduating high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps, so he has experience in the military, which he says does shape some of his views on U.S. foreign policy. He graduated law school, in fact, from Yale Law School in 2013. He also has some connection to Peter Thiel, which we could get into. Some people are quite critical of this, and I think for a good reason. And he was also historically very anti-Trump and then had sort of a flip and became very pro-Trump around 2020, 2021, when he ran for the Senate. But he did come from a very disadvantaged background. He struggled growing up. He came from a broken family and was able to build himself up to be this successful businessman, law school graduate from one of the best universities in the United States. Perhaps that can appeal to some voters, but what I've noticed, in fact, is that there are mixed reactions to this appointment. Some people do not view him as being anti-establishment enough, while others think he is a great choice, and they specifically look to some of his statements and policy ideas on the conflict in Ukraine.